Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. How's everyone doing today? I know many of you have been patiently waiting for me to cover some more stories involving hospitals. So today, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, hospitals. I think it's safe to assume that most of us have been inside a hospital at some point in our life. Maybe to visit a loved one, or maybe for treatment ourselves. But how many of you have ever experienced something strange while you were there? Something you couldn't quite explain? Because if you look into this, there's actually a huge number of paranormal stories connected to hospitals. And honestly, when you really think about it, it kind of makes sense. Hospitals are places where people experience some of the most intense moments of their lives. Birth, suffering, and even death. And when so many powerful emotions pass through one place over the years, some people believe that not everything leaves. Tonight's story is one of those strange incidents that reportedly happened inside a hospital in Thailand. This was shared by a man who worked security there. Let's call him Sakda. Before we start, I just wanted to thank all of you for your continued support of my little storytelling channel. If you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. That will really help me out. At the end of the episode, as always, let's break down the story together from a Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened here. Alright, let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. If we're talking about professions that have a high chance of encountering the paranormal, night shift security guards are usually at the very top of the list. Just as Sakda used to work as a night shift security guard at a hospital in a rural part of Thailand. And during one of his shifts there, he experienced something so terrifying, it's something he still remembers to this day. At the time, Sakda was already in his mid-50s. He had spent most of his life working as a night security guard, so by this point, the job itself was nothing new to him. In fact, he actually preferred the night shift. Things were much quieter, and the pace was slower. Most of the time, there weren't many people around during those late hours, which meant that he could just often sit back, watch some episodes of his favorite shows on his phone, and just pass the time until morning. Sakda remembers that he had only been working at this particular hospital for about a month or so when this incident happened to him. Before this job, he had been a security guard at a shopping center, but after the mall downsized, he ended up getting laid off. Luckily, his kids were already grown up, but he still had a sick wife at home to support, and at his age, finding another job wasn't easy. The only reason he landed this hospital position at all was because he knew someone who already worked there, who then referred him to the hiring manager. So Sakda was extremely grateful just to have steady work again. During the interview process, they explained that his post would be located at the back of the hospital. His job was simple. He would be stationed at the back entrance gate, which was mainly used for hospital staff and for deliveries and stuff like that. Patients won't be using this back entrance, so most nights were expected to be pretty quiet. Sakda was fine with that. It actually sounds like it would be a pretty easy job. But during the interview, the hiring manager asked him something that Sakda still remembers very clearly. She looked at him and asked, "Do you believe in God, Sakda?" The question caught him completely off guard. He paused for a moment, unsure how to respond. It definitely wasn't the kind of question he expected to hear during a job interview. The female hiring manager noticed his hesitation and quickly smiled. "I'm sorry," she said. "That probably sounded like a strange question." Then she clarified, "It's just that the post that you'll be working at is located directly across from the hospital morgue." She continued calmly, "You'll just be responsible for keeping an eye on the people who enter and exit whenever bodies are transferred from the main building into the morgue." A few of the previous security guards didn't last very long because this location made them uncomfortable. She gave him a reassuring smile. "But I think that you'll be a great fit here, Sakda. I just want to make sure we're completely transparent before bringing you on board. We would love for you to stay with us for a long time." Sakda smiled politely and nodded. Having grown up in Thailand, he definitely believed in ghosts, but he had never personally experienced anything paranormal himself, so he wasn't particularly worried. He told the manager that he wasn't afraid, and that if given this opportunity, he would work extremely hard and do his best. The hiring manager smiled and reassured him. He wouldn't actually have to deal with the morgue directly. The hospital staff would handle everything inside the building. His job was simply to monitor those coming in and out. With that, she officially offered Sakda the position, and of course, he accepted. After losing his previous job, he really needed the work. He started the very next day. On his first shift, Sakda's supervisor showed him his station. It was one of those small, standalone security booths located outside the main hospital building. Inside, there wasn't much. Just a small desk, a chair, and a little air conditioning unit mounted right above the doorway. That was pretty much it. The booth sat behind the hospital, near a narrow ramp that led up toward a separate building, the morgue. Honestly, the job itself was very easy. All Sakda really had to do was keep an eye out for anything suspicious, the usual security guard duties, making sure no one was trespassing, and confirm that any vehicles entering through the back gate actually belonged there. The first few nights passed by quickly. Everything felt completely routine. Every now and then, a delivery truck or hospital vehicle would come through, but most of the time, the area was just quiet, so Sakda spent a lot of his shift just sitting inside his booth, scrolling on his phone and watching videos to pass the time. By the sixth night, something a little different happened. Sakda suddenly heard a sound outside his booth. It was the faint scraping sound of gurney wheels rolling across rough concrete. He looked up from a soap opera he had been watching on his phone and glanced out the window to see who was approaching. A hospital staff member in uniform was pushing a gurney toward him. It was unmistakable. He was pushing a body completely wrapped in a white sheet. The man saw Sakda looking up and waved. He walked over to the booth and knocked gently on the glass. "Hey, could you give me a hand?" he asked. "I'm the only one on shift right now. Can you help me push the gurney up the ramp into the morgue?" Without thinking too much about it, Sakda got up immediately to help. Technically, it wasn't part of his job duties, but he never minded lending a hand to coworkers who needed it. He set his phone down and stepped outside the booth, but the moment he got close to the gurney, something about it made his skin crawl. Sakda had never seen a real dead body before. Sure, he's seen scenes in movies, but standing right next to one in real life felt completely different. He quickly tried to push the feeling aside. The body had come out from the hospital building and now needed to be transferred to the morgue, exactly as the supervisor had explained during training. This was just the first time he had personally seen it happen. Sakda grabbed the bottom end of the gurney and pushed, while the staff member pulled from the front as they slowly guided it up the ramp toward the morgue doors. Once they reached the entrance, the staff member thanked them and disappeared inside. Over the next couple of weeks, Sakda saw a few more bodies being brought out and transferred to the morgue. Little by little, he started getting used to it. But then, one night, something happened that he would never forget. It was around 3 a.m. Sakda was sitting in his booth, eating rice from his lunchbox he had brought from home. Suddenly, someone tapped on the glass of the booth. Sakda quickly swallowed his mouthful of food and looked up, but there was no one standing outside the window. Instead, he noticed something strange. Gurney was sitting by itself in the empty parking lot outside the hospital doors. No staff was pushing it, just the gurney and the body covered in white. That's odd, Sakda thought. Usually, whenever a body was brought out, there was always a staff member nearby asking for help. He stepped outside the booth and looked around, but there was no one. Sakda assumed the staff member had probably popped back inside the hospital to grab something they forgot. So, he went back into his own booth and sat down again, deciding to finish his dinner while he waited. He lifted another spoonful of rice toward his mouth, and that's when he heard it. The wheels of the gurney began to move. Right before his eyes, the gurney started rolling away from the hospital doors by itself. it slowly picked up speed as it rolled down the slight incline of the parking lot, heading straight toward the morgue ramp. Then suddenly, crash! The gurney slammed into the curb and flipped over violently. The body was thrown onto the ground. Sakda nearly dropped his lunchbox as he ran outside toward it. His heart was pounding. He felt guilty immediately, thinking maybe it was his fault for not checking whether the wheels were locked. As he struggled to lift the overturned gurney back upright, he suddenly heard a voice behind him. "Hey, sir, can you give me a hand?" Sakda turned around. Standing there was a hospital staff member in white uniform. He looked to be in his 40s. He had medium-length hair, a raspy voice, and a large dark birthmark on the left side of his face under his ear. The man walked over and helped Sakda lift the gurney upright. Then, he asked Sakda to help lift the body back onto it. Sakda's skin crawled at the thought of touching a corpse, even though it was completely covered up. But he didn't want to refuse someone asking for help, so he grabbed the legs. They were cold and stiff. Once the body was back on the gurney, the man spoke again. "Sir, since you're already here, can you help me push it into the building?" he said. "I'm not feeling very well today, and I don't have much strength." Now Sakda was starting to feel a little annoyed. He didn't mind helping, but it seemed like every time a body came through here, the staff expected him to do half the work. Still, he sighed and nodded. "I'll help you this time," he said. "But you guys should know this isn't really part of my job, right?" The man apologized and promised it would be the last time. So, Sakda grabbed the back of the gurney and followed him up the ramp. This was the first time Sakda had ever been inside the morgue. The hallway was narrow and dim. Concrete walls lined the right side. On the left side were glass windows looking into empty rooms with metal tables inside. After walking a short distance, the man pointed toward the room ahead. "Here, this is the morgue," he said. Sakda took a deep breath and pushed the gurney through the doorway. He quickly left the gurney near the entrance and stepped back out, eager to get away from the room. He wanted to ask the man where he had gone earlier when the gurney rolled across the parking lot, but when Sakda stepped back outside into the parking lot, the man was gone. "That's strange," he thought. Usually, when staff dropped off a body, they came straight back out and never really stayed inside the morgue. Still trying to brush it off, Sakda figured that this staff probably had some other tasks he needed to take care of before coming back out. So he returned to his booth alone and continued eating his dinner. A little while later, he noticed several hospital staff members running around outside. Something seemed wrong. Over the security radio, he heard them talking. A body had gone missing from the emergency room. It hadn't been processed yet. Some staff thought maybe a family member had secretly taken the body. A few of the staff went into the morgue to check as well. Then, just before dawn, a voice came over the radio. "We found the missing body." But now, there was a problem. Every body that entered the morgue had to pass by Sakda's security post, so naturally, everyone came to question him. They asked him who moved the body. Sakda calmly described the staff member who came to him for help, the man with the birthmark on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone went completely silent. The staff looked at each other. Then they asked Sakda to follow them inside the morgue. He was a bit confused, but worried about his job now, he followed them. Inside the room, they told him to stay calm. One of the staff members slowly pulled back the sheet covering the body that he helped move in there. The moment Sakda saw the face, his legs nearly gave out. The hair, the clothes, and the birthmark on the cheek. It was the exact same man who had asked him to help push the gurney. The staff quietly told Sakda the man's name was Perry. He had been a cleaner at the hospital, and earlier that very night, he had died from a sudden heart attack while working. This was one of the strangest things that Sakda experienced during his time working at this hospital. He continued working there for several more years afterwards, but luckily, nothing ever happened that was quite as terrifying as that night. Still, it was something that he would never forget. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think happened here to Sakda? Please pause the video here and let us know what you think below. Alright, so what do I think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? There are a few things that I want to dive a little deeper into from the story. Why did Perry not move on immediately after death? Did Perry know that he was dead? There's a lot of questions that probably come to mind when you hear stories like this, and I want to talk about them. So let's break this down bit by bit to see if we can come to a conclusion that makes sense culturally. So, why didn't Perry move on immediately after he died? Why did he linger? Well, there could actually be a wide variety of reasons why this happens. In this case, specifically, we don't know for a fact yet if Perry is actually lingering in terms of haunting the hospital. It's way too soon to determine that, but I personally don't believe that Perry is a vengeful ghost. What Sakda interacted with is what's considered the immediate post-death window and not actually a long-term haunting. In my culture, we believe that when a person passes, depending on how they die, the soul often remains for a short period of time before taken to the afterlife. Do you remember Oxhead and Horseface, Mamin, from past episodes? The underworld escorts. Well, they're actually not the only ones that do this job. There are many, many others. Mamin are just the most famous and well-known ones, but there's also the black and white impermanents. We call them Hatmosung, black impermanents, and Bakmosung, white impermanents. Together, they're known as Hakbakmosung. But their job is the same as what Oxhead and Horseface do, to escort souls to the underworld. But a common misconception about these underworld soul escorts is that they appear instantly at death for everyone that dies. This is not the case. In some situations, they can show up instantly right when death occurs, but it's not always the case. It's very conditional, depending heavily on the type of death and the condition of the soul that they're instructed to take. It's not a fixed rule, but more like different responses depending on the situation. Death, in Chinese belief, isn't like flipping a switch. It's more of a transition where the process involves the body's energy dispersing and the soul separating from the body. And this doesn't always happen instantly. There's sometimes a short window where the body has died, but the soul is still loosely attached to the body, and consciousness is still functioning. During this stage, the underworld escorts may not intervene yet, because technically, the soul hasn't fully registered as departed from the body yet. I know, this is a very complex concept from Chinese belief, so I'll try to break it down where it's easier to understand. So what do I mean when I say registered? It's believed that we all have a predestined lifespan in this world, an allotted life here. The underworld operates like a bureaucracy where there's records of every birth and every death, as well as everything in between. This is referred to as the Sanzeibo, the Book of Life and Death. So this registration that I'm referring to is a process. Step 1, the physical death occurs, and the body stops functioning. Step 2, spiritual separation begins, Hei San Wan Lei. So energy disperses, and the soul begins separating. Step 3, the local spiritual authorities become aware of this new death. So entities that govern different areas like Tode Gong, Earth God, are believed to log or acknowledge the deaths in their domain. Once the death is acknowledged, it is then recognized in the underworld system. And only after this, the soul is officially considered departed, and escorts are dispatched. And keep in mind, every case is conditional and different. Clean deaths are very different from sudden deaths. Sudden and unexpected deaths create a gap. In sudden death cases, the soul is usually unsettled and not stabilized, so the soul will wander briefly and continue familiar actions. It hasn't anchored yet into that death state. I feel that this is Perry's situation. He died suddenly of a heart attack, entering a Yamwan Mesan stage, where he is briefly lingering in semi-confusion. The escorts have not come to take him yet, because it was too soon. He just passed not too long ago. They are most likely waiting for a bit, for the transition to stabilize first. The underworld escorts are also known to give souls a grace period sometimes, to allow them to finish what they were doing, process what happened, return to somewhere they're familiar with, and after all that, then they will come and take them away. And so, just to rewind a bit to when I talked about the allotted time we have here, am I saying that we all have a predetermined lifespan? Kind of. In a way, yes, but there are nuances to it. In traditional belief, this is called Yeongso, which is our pre-allowed lifespan in the human world. But this is actually not a set number that never changes. This is believed to be influenced by karma from past lives, Yango, fate, destiny, Mingwon, and accumulated merit and wrongdoings in the current life. So in theory, we're all born with a baseline lifespan, but it's not completely fixed. It's extended by good deeds and accumulating merit, Sakda. Why do the underworld escorts show up instantly for some deaths, but not all? This is dependent on the death, and it's different on a case-by-case basis. There are cases where they do show up instantly. These are for extremely clean deaths, where the soul separates with no issues, there's no confusion, and the transition is smooth. These are usually what we call good deaths, the way that we would all like to pass over in the future, peaceful and expected from old age. These individuals are usually mentally prepared to depart. It's actually believed that these individuals sometimes even see the escorts themselves before they even pass, because they've already shown up a little early, shortly before they pass away. These are probably the easier cases for the escorts to carry out because there's no delay. Everything is aligned properly. There's no confusion, no lingering. So to keep it super simple, think of it this way. The three main things that determine if the escorts show up immediately versus delayed are 1. The type of death, 2. Mental state at death, and 3. Spiritual condition. If the type of death is natural, then it's usually a smoother transition. But if it's sudden, then there will be confusion, which leads to a delayed arrival of the escorts. If the person died with acceptance, then this will probably lead to an immediate escort arrival, while confusion will lead to a delay. As for spiritual condition, if the individual was calm at moment of death, then the escort will probably show up immediately. But if there was a lot of trauma, then that will lead to delays. Now Perry's death was sudden. He wasn't prepared for it at all. The escorts will most likely not appear instantly to take him away, and he's in a brief buffer state. His mind is still catching up to the fact that his body has died. It's not that he's refusing to move on, it's just that he simply doesn't fully realize yet that he has died. I also think this is why he was asking for help to move his body into the morgue. I think that he has helped hospital staff with pushing bodies on gurneys before, seeing the fact that these staff kept asking Sakda to do the same, even though it was not part of his job. I think that Perry was just going through the motions of what he did often at work in life. It's more like muscle memory of the soul. Now, we don't know too much about Perry as a person, but it seems to me like he was someone like Sakda, where he was willing to go above and beyond to help his coworkers do tasks that weren't part of his normal job duties. He sounds like a good person, but we would need more information on his story. But let's just say that he was a good person in life, where he has no resentment or unhealthy fixations on something in life. I don't think that he will linger for much longer to become a vengeful ghost. He also didn't appear again after that initial time he asked Sakda for help to move the gurney. It's very likely that he has already moved on to the next phase of existence after his transitional phase. Thanks so much, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it to the end of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. Until we speak again next week, stay safe and good night.